Hello everyone and welcome back. Let's talk about Elisande. Now she's a 3-phase fight. Phase 1 is the simplest and then we keep adding mechanics on top of that. So in phase 1 we're going to have two different types of ads spawn, a blue ad and a pink ad. The blue ad is always priority. He is going to slow everyone down, and when these ads die they're going to throw an AoE bubble on the ground that affects time. So basically if you kill the blue one, he's going to drop a blue buff on the ground that's going to affect time by slowing it down, and the pink one will affect time by buffing it up. You do not ever want to stand inside of the blue bubble, but you do want to stand inside of the pink bubble. The pink bubble is a semi-bloodlust and the blue bubble will actually slow you down. One other thing to note is that you should hang out near and around the blue bubble to avoid arcane orbs on the ground. So here we have the pull. Again, don't ever stand at anything on the ground unless it's a pink bubble. So one thing to note is that the tanks need to taunt off every 4 to 6 stacks. And here we have the first two ads. The blue ad doesn't need to be tanked, but the pink ad does need to be picked up. So I did have my other tank go down immediately. I'm going to be tanking the boss and the pink ad, which should never happen. The pink ad has very high damage and so does the boss. So here we get the blue bubble. Everyone moves out. Don't get the debuff by standing in it for too long. When the pink ad goes down, you do want to stand in that. Pick up the speed ad. You see these orbs? They're also slowed down by the blue area. So basically you want to hide behind this blue bubble and allow the orbs to slow down so you can dodge them. If you get hit by one of them, it's not too bad. If you run in a little too late and you get hit by 2 or 3, you're going to go down. So basically make sure you get that pink buff because it works kind of like a heroism. One other thing to note with these ads is the blue ad does cast something that needs to be interrupted all the time, and that's mostly the job for the DPS. You do see these puddles here in the background. Those also need to be soaked by DPS. Now they do tick for a high amount of damage, so if you want to cheese it, throw someone in there with ice block or with a turtle shell or some kind of immunity, you can. However, people can walk in, take 1 stack, diminish the puddle and run out. Basically you just don't want these puddles to overrun you. So as long as there's some people walking in and out, you'll be fine. So again, blue ad is priority, pink ad comes second. So here we have a pink buff on the ground and again taunts off the boss. And this is all of phase 1. These are all of the mechanics that are basically present in phase 1. You want to keep yourself with the haste buff at all times. One other thing to note about this boss, since you do get this haste buff and it reduces cooldowns, you can pop lust twice in this fight. So you can pop bloodlust once in the very beginning in phase 1 and pop bloodlust again towards the end of phase 3. So if you want to maximize everything, absolutely bloodlust twice. Again, here we see all the orbs. Hide behind the blue one, dodge everything, and then get back into the fight. We do have some small AoE damage going out that bounces off the tanks. It's not as critical as it would be in Heroic and Mythic, so you can just basically stack on together and cleave everything down. Here we have these AoEs on the ground. You don't want to stand in them. It was the end of phase 1 for us, so we don't have to worry about it too much. But those are the puddles that you only want to get one person to soak up at a time. So here, I'm no longer actively tanking. I soak up a little bit of that puddle, and then I go back to actively tanking. Again, make sure you're prioritizing the blue ad. We did get the pink ad there. The other off tank has to pick that up. In phase 2, you're also going to have a beam to dodge. The boss is going to start targeting people, and actually arrows are going to come out of her that are going to be beams in that direction. So you did see also here, I do have the explosion debuff. If you get that as a tank, you're more than welcome to run out. If you don't want to cleave everything down, if the raid damage is too high for you, you can absolutely run out. However, we found that the raid damage wasn't that bad for us, so the tanks didn't necessarily have to run out and run away with the explosion debuff. Here we have the beam. You do see an arrow on the ground coming from the boss. Basically, you don't want to stand anywhere in that arrow so you don't get hit. The difference between normal and heroic is the fact that this beam in heroic mode targets 4 different people and actually hits them 4 times in a row. So if you have defensive cooldowns, healing cooldowns, anything to kind of reduce that damage, I would highly suggest you use it because the beams are going to be hurting really bad. One other thing you do see here is that Elisande actually starts casting. What you want to do is the tanks need to interrupt that cast every single time it happens. In LFR, you only have 1 beam. You don't have any of the zones drop down on the floor to be able to deplete, and the burst debuff put on the tank is actually even easier. So you don't have to worry about anything besides bubbles, and the beams aren't even going to hurt as bad, and they only hurt 1 person. So here we see the beams again move out of that. Again, at this point, you see the aberrating explosion fading from the tanks. That's when you can swap tanks and make sure that nobody else is taking a lot of damage. However, we found that the damage wasn't that bad for us, so we decided to leave the other tank for the ads when they come up. So during phase 2 and phase 3, we didn't swap tanks. However, you can when the tank gets the debuff. One other thing we do have that's going on during this time is that some people are getting a tormented debuff. Some DPS are getting that tormented debuff, and what that does is it does a high amount of damage. If you have the tormented debuff, you do not want to run into the pink zone because it'll make that debuff tick faster and actually make you go down. One final thing we have during these phases is that Elisande will cast these bombs that telegraph to the ground, and they need to be soaked. So you see people standing in these bombs. If they're not soaked, they do really high raid-wide damage. You can get away with not soaking one of them. However, not soaking all of them will cause an instant wipe. So you should designate people, ranged DPS or healers, to run into these zones and actually absorb them. So again, to sum everything up, priority is always the blue ad, followed by the pink ad, followed by the boss. Tanks should always taunt off each other with the debuffs. No tank should ever tank the pink ad and the boss. You should get ranged DPS to soak the puddles and the bombs. And if you're debuffed by torment, don't pick up the pink buff. The very last thing to know is the beam. Don't stand in the way of anyone else, or if you see these beams on the floor, dodge them at all costs. As long as you keep the boss and the blue ad interrupted, soak the puddles, and soak the meteors, you should be fine with this fight. Again, you do see we have quite a few puddles here, but it's nothing overwhelming because we have had a lot of DPS actually soaking them up. Prioritize the ads. Here we have another ad spawning. It's very important that you swap over the ads as fast as you can. However, you do see that in phase 2 and phase 3, the tank debuffs that require taunt off of Elisande are not as crucial and actually don't hurt as bad as the ones in phase 1. So if you do want to stick with the same tank, you can. Just realize that your healing will have to be a little bit higher. Something else to note is that phase 1 and phase 2 end when Elisande gets to 10%, while phase 3 ends with her at 0%. So if you're getting close to pushing that 10% mark, you can actually ignore an ad, focus on her until she gets to 10%. Here we have the second heroism as part of phase 3. It is towards the end, but you do see that you can definitely fit in 2 heroisms. At this point, I start soaking up a little bit of a puddle to help out, and here we have another ad. Elisande is down so low that we focus her, move the ad. I do have an explosion on me, so I move away from the group a little bit. As always, I'm covering every single boss of NIGHTHOLD. If you guys want those guides, go ahead and click here on the screen. I'm getting the last of them out today, so if you guys need any help in any of those fights, go ahead and click here or click on my channel. And as always, good luck out there.